Let's start off. Let's get this thing kicked off. I'm going to share my screen and get some things rolling here for us. This is the next to last Horizon Rooms of the second season. So anybody joining us on this fifth out of six episodes, this is going to be a good one. This is a really hot topic, and I'm excited to kind of dig in with the folks that I've got in the room today. And we're really going to be tackling something that is critical in terms of moving systems forward. It's sometimes overlooked, and sometimes people sneer at this one. Sometimes people think, oh, wow, yeah, mission, vision, blah, blah, blah. Except the problem is it's actually very critical. And so the three individuals that I have joining us today in the Horizon Room are experts in the thing that we're talking about today. And I can share that with you with good conscience, because I've seen evidence of what they do on the streets. And so not only are they able to talk the talk, but they're walking the walk. And so I've got three friends and esteemed colleagues with me: Jennifer Blaine, Michael Robert, and Dave Miyashiro. If you could please I'll start with you, Jennifer. Quick intro. Where are you and what are you up to these days?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Blaine, and I'm the superintendent of the Spring Branch Independent School District. Spring Branch is a school district that is located in West Houston, Texas. We are about 44 square miles with about 33,500 students, and very diverse. In fact, our makeup is actually a microcosm of the state of Texas, and so we're really proud of our diversity. And what's up is we just ended a school year and we're getting ready for another one. So we're actually in professional development right now, and we have all of our leaders engaged, and it's been a great day.
Cool. That's always fun. That's super exciting for me. Coming out of the instructional coaching ranks, that's always like big time fun for me. I'm jealous, actually. I miss that part. Dave, what about you?
Yeah, my name is David Miyashiro, superintendent of the Cajon Valley School District. We are 65 square miles with 17,000 students in 28 schools. And our last day of school is tomorrow as well. And excited about a grant that we received to measure our vision, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Thank you for having me.
Wow, that's super exciting. Michael?
Hello, Michael Robert, superintendent of the Osborne School District here in Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix is interesting. You know, we have elementary school districts, high school districts, and then union high school districts. So we're a small elementary school district of about 2,500 students. Our union high school district is the Phoenix Union High School District, and there are 13 elementary districts that all feed into that one high school district. So one of 14 partners here within the city of Phoenix. Together, you know, we educate over 100,000 kids, but my piece is 2,500 K-8 kids here. And we are right, if you fly into Phoenix and you look where the tall buildings are, that's where the Osborne School District is.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, this end of the school year time is really pretty remarkable. Everybody's sort of holding on and we can make it. So it's fun. So today we're talking about vision, and it's great, Dave, that you brought that up and you're measuring that, because one of the things that I think we need to get into here is really, how do you get to where you folks are, and then how do you move into sustainability. So I've got a couple of challenges here. And one of those that has showed up in every one of the conversations that we have is that schools have to start thinking and acting differently. And we know that, and we've known that for a long time. There are systems like yours that are doing that, and it didn't happen overnight. It went along with a lot of full brains and a lot of hard work and a lot of collaboration and team. And that's critical. But for some folks, they haven't gotten there yet. And that's a bummer, because what you see as evidence of not having a clearly articulated vision is sort of disconnected and lack of cohesion in the system. And as you start to move work forward, that starts to show up. So we want to start talking about, and I've got a couple of questions there that are going to guide the discussion. What I do want to start with, however, is something a little bit different. So I'm going to stop sharing and share some words that I know that you might recognize. Um, and so one of those is some information from one of your school systems, and this is actually pretty remarkable. So I just picked one. And Michael, this is actually from Osborne, and it speaks to joy, right? We seek hope, beauty, and fun in every day. That's meaningful to me. That means that you have identified that is important for the system to move forward and for you to do the work that you need to do, and that is actually articulated then within the system is remarkable. So also from Cajon Valley, innovate and develop. We support the development and continuous improvement of all staff. We recognize and acknowledge when colleagues do great work. We encourage risk-taking, breaking down barriers, and implement new ideas. Those aren't just words, right? That's not something that lives on a shelf. I have seen that being active in the system within the Cajon Valley system. The other one that I want to highlight here is limitless curiosity. Never stop learning and growing, empowered to innovate, tenaciously embrace challenges, unleashed potential. So those three examples live in all three of your systems. And that's evidence to me of a vision and a plan that drives movement for that system. So the first thing that I want to start out with, having sort of set the context for that, my first question is, how do you get started on that? How do you identify and begin to craft a vision that results in some of the things that I just read? I'll start with Jennifer, with you, if that's okay.
Yes. So limitless curiosity is one of our core values, and we really hold that near and dear to our heart. Our vision in Spring Branch is that every student will graduate prepared for either a technical certification, military training, a 2-year or a 4-year degree. And we want kids should have those choices. They should have all those choices, and we shouldn't be limiting their options by what we do or do not do while they're with us. And so we see our goal as far beyond when they cross the stage, but it's like really how well do they do when they leave us? And so the limitless curiosity piece is really important because although we are very focused, and Chris, we talked about this before, we're very focused on 3 things in our system that we feel like help leverage our kids to be prepared for T24. We do feel like there's a lot of different pathways that kids can take. And there's not everybody has to go to a 4-year college. There are lots of different things kids can do to be successful. And so we want our kids to ask questions. We want them to be curious. We want them to be empowered. We want them to own their own learning, and we want them to really embrace and be responsible for their own learning. And we do whatever we can to help, create that limitless curiosity within every single child.
And so that's just one of 5, right? So you've got the five components, and so how did you identify those? How did you come to that spot?
So we developed our core values back in we started working on this in 2014, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly. So we really felt like we needed to be grounded in who we are as a school district and what we believe. So we actually involved our entire community in the identification of what our community felt like they wanted for their kids. So it wasn't just the school district and our employees, but it was all of our families and our community members. So it was a huge, it was like an 18-month process where we actually were able to drill down and identify those five core values, and they really drive and undergird everything we do. And so it's, you have the limitless curiosity, moral compass, every child, collective greatness, and collaborative spirit. And so everything we do is grounded or should be grounded in those things. And if we find ourselves veering off of a path where they're not, we know we have to bring ourselves back, because that's what we say we're about.
Nice. Congratulations. I have your list of 5 here, and you nailed every one of them. So good job. Nicely done. Michael, what about you? You've got a similar type of a descriptive document, And everybody has that sort of succinct vision statement, but it's those core values and the things that fall underneath it that really move the work. How did you get started with that?
A very similar process to what Dr. Blaine just described. Our strategic planning building process took a little over a year and a half, and it was during COVID time. So what started off as these big groups of people together, lots of energy in the room. Had a different feel towards the end of that strategic planning process. But part of the rationale behind having the strategic plan in place too had a little bit to do with the leadership journey with our district. My two predecessors were in the district, when I was hired. Dr. Wilma Basnet was the superintendent of the Osborne School District for 28 years. And her successor, Patty Tate, was her deputy and was appointed superintendent. They were so nervous about Dr. B retiring. They wanted the continuity, and they appointed Patty. So when I was hired, it was the first time in 31 years the community kind of had a say in the next step. I had been a principal for 10 years in the district, so I was a known commodity. But still going through that process, the selection, and really wanting to, as I came in, really involve the community in that strategic planning process. Those core values were going to be critical, and so choosing words, 5 words, and anybody can get a list and come up with those 5 words. But when we, came up with our 5 core values: integrity, equity, joy, growth, relationship, we wanted to define what each of those words meant. Joy can mean something different to me than it does to you. So when we speak, and when you see things on our literature that says that joy is a core value, within Osborne, we let you know what that means. We seek hope, beauty, and fun in every day. And there's a little 1-sentence descriptor to every single one of our core values. We're an elementary school district. We've been, expanded our preschool options down to 3-year-olds. We do 3 through 14 years old. And if we do not bring joy into every single day, then we're really missing the mark. But also those core values are really important as we looked into, you've got your vision, your mission, your core values that come out of that. But then it's what do you do about that? So one of those big things in terms of partnerships is, and we're very clear in saying our path forward with partnerships is we want to be in mutually beneficial partnerships with other people that share our same values. So, there's kind of a matrix of what we do when we enter a new partnership. And if it doesn't align, they may be doing great work, but if their values don't align with our values, we know that there's going to be some friction down the road. So, we're very intentional in choosing those values. I make sure everybody knows what those values are, is able to, list out what that description of the value means, because we want to make sure that we actually know what we're talking about, that everyone is talking about the same thing, that the words mean something. I'm rambling on, but economy of words is a really important thing.
I like that you characterized it that way. I have a question about values alignment that I'm going to come back to. But Dave, where did your process start? Because you have a very similar type of an end product. It's manifested a little bit differently for you, but where did you start? How did you articulate and identify that path forward?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Definitely commonalities with Jennifer and Michael as well. Our mission vision started with a visit to Pittsburgh, actually, back in 2015, and was able to observe the Allegheny region and how the university's philanthropy, K-12, Pittsburgh Penguins, Pittsburgh Pirates, and Steelers all came together around a shared community mission. And I thought that's what we should do in El Cajon. And so in partnership with our city manager, our mayor, our police and fire chief, some of the local pastors, and our Chamber of Commerce, we just started having conversations about what we do together in public service. And at the end of the day, our shared mission is to make our community the best place to live, work, play, and raise a family. And that's what is on my shirt today. But if you ask the police chief, what's the mission of the police department? It's to make our community the best place to live, work, play, and raise a family. And it's the same for public service and public works and the Department of Defense. And each of us have our own vision that allows us as our unique organization to help the community achieve that. And our simple vision, which was 8 years of conversations with parents, students, families, and faculty over time, is simply happy kids and healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment. If we can ensure that all kids are happy, they are self-aware, develop self-love and self-esteem through their interactions with us, are in healthy relationships with their peers, but also the adults on campus sustained over time, and in the community with people that they can help develop their vocational identity towards gainful employment, then we can ensure that every child will have access to economic mobility, to a place in society that accepts them, and self-actualization. So happy kids, healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment. And we've developed our 8 promises, which could be, I guess, translated core values as well, in terms of how to get there and what the employee actions are to achieve our vision.
So what I like about that, what's intriguing to me is that it's a whole community, and sometimes you see a slight maybe some disparity between where the community is headed and then what the school is doing, and for those two to be linked inextricably is really strong. That's powerful, and so it also helps because it lightens the load. Then we're all going toward the same spot, and that's awesome. So values alignment, Michael, something that was interesting to me, and as I was listening, and you all three sort of touched on it. The vision statement is just some words, right? And Michael, it was sort of like you were saying, but really what we're talking about is the way forward becomes starts to look like those values or the promises made, and so the value alignment for you and probably for all of you, that becomes the lens. How do you begin to translate that for people? Because it's a complex thing, right? I mean, and listening to Dave and all three of you, it's one thing to have the idea, and for you to sort of conceptualize it in your brain is relatively easy, right? You're like, of course I see it. But then being able to articulate that to others and then be able to say, this doesn't line up. And they might say, well, no, it totally does. It lines up with this one. How do you enforce that? How do you make sure that is authentic?
You know, that one thing, there are competing values, right? Out there in the world. You can look at the headlines, something I talked about in February, Chris. You know, you look at the headlines and you can get drawn in so many different directions, you know, as a leader, that you need these core values as like your guiding light, and helps you in decision making. But, you know, we try and apply it when we're at a decision point. And we make those decisions in line. So, you know, one of the things that's going on that's kind of raised a little bit of noise is the, you know, we're a right to work state. So, with our teachers association, you know, we have a, you know, in our policies, a meet and confer process. So what do we want that to look like? It could very much look like competing interests coming into a room. 20 some years ago, you know, those interests came in. It was this association, and then, you know, the administration and the teachers and the classified staff, and arguing over crumbs because we're very poorly funded here within Arizona, right? It can be a contentious thing. But when you use a values-centric approach to looking at that issue that's in front of you, how are we going to look at coming into this meet and confer process with a sense of integrity? We do the you know, that's one of our core values. We do the right thing even when it's hard. Okay, so we've got this hard work in front of us. We want to do the right thing. So we're not going to make this a contentious process. We're going to form a budget committee. It's not going to be that teachers are represented by these 2 or 3 people only from the Teachers Association, especially if you've only got 20, 30% of your teachers, because it's a choice here, whether or not you're going to be in the association. So you may have a minority representation of your union. So we make sure that we invite certified classified administrators. We want upper grades, lower grades, special areas, master teachers, classified administrators, certified administrators, and we lay out the whole budget. And we say our one goal is to present a balanced budget. What are the different options that we have on the table in terms of if there's extra money, how are we going to spend it? If we're looking at, here goes these costs, for the upcoming year, retirement costs are going up, healthcare costs are going up. We need to find, money. We don't have more money to spend this year. Where are we going to come? It's just a problem that's laid on the table with a collaborative approach. So you need relationships in order to do that. You need to bring in a sense of integrity in order to do that. So, you bring the values into what's presented in front of you.
Sure. And so all of those things are sort of flying under the broad vision of where we're going, and having that common place is helpful then in terms of bringing in others, because then you can say, look, let's agree. We all nodded around the room. We're going to that spot over there. And this is how we're going to get there. Let's work together to do that. And that shows up in all of those. So in terms of going from, I have this vision, you've brought people together, staff, families, community members, businesses, all of the various stakeholders in the community. You've done the workshops, and you've had people scribbling on chart packs and talking excitedly, and then moving over to Zoom, and then maybe there's less excitement. But then how do you move from that point? Because that's relatively easy for folks to grab onto in their brain. They can go, yeah, I can totally bring some folks together and do those things. How do you move from that into actually moving the system forward cohesively? Because it's one thing to have the words on paper. It's another one to actually cause that to turn into action, and then not be in fits and spurts, but have a very explicit path forward. So Jennifer, how did you, I know that you've got a huge marketing machine behind you, which is wildly effective, and I love, because I'm a marketing guy. But how do you move forward cohesively so that you're moving as a system and not just sort of ones and twos?
I mean, I think that's a great question, because that's actually something that we have. So I've been in Spring Branch 22 years. I'm finishing my 4th year as the superintendent. And that, what you just stated, is something that we have actually struggled with for years, and something that we were determined to get a handle on. So T24 has been our vision since 2012. Actually, it was 2 superintendents prior to myself. It's a great vision, but we were kind of, I guess, latching on to lots of flashy stuff to get there, but not really focused. And so one of the things that, I feel really strongly about is having focus and clarity in the system. And Chris, you and I talked about that when you were here in Houston. And I just, so you can't just have a vision. It can't just be words on a paper, but you really have to detail and delineate how you're going to get there. And so that's where we talk about the big 3 in our system. So if you talk to a custodian, a bus driver, a teacher, a principal, somebody in finance, they can tell you what the 3 priorities in our system are that are going to get us where we need to go. And it's really pretty simple. It's reading, it's math, and it's supports for kids. Emotional supports for kids, social supports for kids, all academic, all of that. And so when we talk about those 3 things, we then talked about and really got down to brass tacks about what does it look like when a kid is T24 ready at every juncture along the way? Because that's another thing we didn't have. What was happening with us is we said, well, we have this goal of T24 over here, but then how do we know that we're where we need to be along the way once the kid gets there? So in other words, does the kid just show up at their senior year and we make a decision whether they've gotten there, or do we know along the way? So we've created what we call the characteristics of a T24 ready graduate. And we have really identified not only the markers and the characteristics, but the data points that each student needs to be where they need to be before they go on to the next level. So we've identified those in pre-K through 2, grades 3 through 5. So at the end of 5th grade, where do they need to be successful in 6th grade? And then in 6th through 8th, where do they need to be in 8th grade in order to be prepared for 9th grade and high school, and so on. And so we have found that over the past, and we did the same thing. We worked with a community group. We brought everybody in, the stakeholders, to really kind of talk through this. But then staff took those characteristics and really drilled down to what does that look like when a kid is truly ready. And that has made a mountain of difference for us. And I think back to what both Michael and Dave said, and you have to really stay focused. So all of your, every resource, time, money, people has to be focused on those things that you say you're about. And so I think Michael said, somebody may come in with a great idea and it may be wonderful, but it isn't going to further what you're trying to do. And so sometimes you have to say no to those things. And so we've had to learn to stay very focused, to say no to things that are not going to necessarily help us, and to stay focused on our vision. And that's really how we've tried to put it into concrete terms that people can understand and get us where we need to go.
And I think that there's going to be some moments where really great people in the system come in with those really great ideas. And it's always a bummer to say, I love that idea.
Yeah.
That's good work. It's worthy. And it's not aligned.
That's right.
And then for that person to go, darn it. Or shoot, I guess maybe I didn't understand. And so that's an interesting question, and we'll get to it a little bit later. But I like the data point and the data measurement to measure those things, because sometimes that portrait of a graduate sits on a poster on the wall and isn't actually measured and moved and articulated quite as actively as it could be. Which is an interesting segue to Dave, because Dave, you spilled the beans early. You said, hey, we're measuring the vision. And now I'm curious, because this aligns with what Jennifer is talking about. And all three of you, in fact, are now talking about, we have the vision, we've articulated it, it's shiny, it looks cool online, it has depth, because now we have rubrics and frameworks that start to fill in gaps and tell people how to do these things. But measuring values, I think, starts to look like measurement of those things that flow beneath it. But I'm curious to know, how does that look like in your system now?
So there are two ways to answer that question. The one that I shared earlier was more on the student performance and assessment lens. So the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, we've been working with them for a couple of years now. They gave us money to start building an assessment system to measure happy kids and healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment. So how do you measure self-awareness and self-esteem, self-efficacy, belief? How can you quantify the network and relationships peer-to-peer, peer-to-adult on a campus? And how can you start to measure vocational identity starting in kindergarten, with kids understanding their unique strengths, interests, and values, aligning to the career exploration and opportunities around them, both in the community and globally? Those metrics, if we were to replace the current accountability system of ESSER with that, I think would actually change outcomes for any community. So that's what we're excited about. But in terms of the promises, so our core values are called promises. Early in COVID, we had the opportunity to meet with Horst Schulze. He is the creator and founder of the Ritz-Carlton Company. And in a lecture, he started talking about how he took his mission to make the Ritz-Carlton Company the best hotel company in the world, with a vision of ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, and his 20 standards of excellence that every employee carries around in their pocket. And there's simple rules to get to that mission and vision. One of them is, if a guest walks within 6 feet of you, you stop what you're doing, you look them in the eye and say, "Good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. How are you doing today?" And you wait for the response, and you care about the response. Another tenet is, if an employee complains or has a concern, it's yours now to own. And every employee has a $2,000 discretionary budget to fix it. So if a guest says, "You know what, my room wasn't clean on time, I don't feel like this hotel is taking care of me," the employee, whether it's a wait staff or our gardening person, can say, "I'm so sorry, sir. Can I buy you and your wife dinner tonight? It's on me. We're so sorry. We will fix that. And I'm going to send someone to your room. I'm going to take care of it myself." It's like, that's incredible, because and he would say, on any floor, in any building, on any continent, you can expect the same level of impeccability at any Ritz-Carlton. And I employ 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds. How do you get young kids off the street who don't yet speak the language to perform at that level consistently? And he said, you have to have your mission, your vision, and then very measurable, attainable actions that you hold people accountable for. that's what we were missing. We didn't have that. So then we went to our employees and said, how do we make sure that our mission and vision happen for every kid in every classroom, just like in every room on every floor in the Ritz-Carlton company? And that's where our 8 promises came from. And those are the employee standards, 8 employee promises that we promote on a regular basis to achieve that. And we stole some of them from the Ritz-Carlton too. But Horst Schulze would say that we plagiarized, but we meet with him monthly and he consults with us. And we're grateful for learning from private industry on how they do it.
So that's an interesting connection because what we're talking about is putting a man on the moon, right? And there's always that story about the janitor who's actually putting someone on the moon. That sounds great, and I know that we have compliance and we have engagement. What I'm curious about now is from the outside, from here in Wisconsin, it sounds like that's fantastic. I can go to any school in Cajon Valley. I can talk to any individual, and what I'm going to get is the pocket version of the promises, except that they're committed to memory. My guess is that you had some periods of time, and all 3 of you did, where you were sort of where those things were becoming habitual, and where those things were still sort of new, and you're like, yeah, no thanks, I don't really want to do that. But how long did it take for it to become more broad spread? And I'll ask Dave first, but then I'm going to come back to both of you, Michael and Jennifer, also.
We're still in process. We met Horst Schulze at the very beginning of the pandemic, and he took us on as a client because he doesn't take just anybody as a client, because we were the only school district at scale that was open during April, May, and June of 2020. And he asked, why isn't my granddaughter's school in Atlanta open for her? And so we engaged in a conversation. Gosh, I forgot where I was going with that. What was the question?
So the question was, how do you ensure that this becomes ingrained, right?
Yeah.
So it's common practice.
So our 8 promises, and I brought them up so I didn't mess up because I know you're testing us.
I totally am. I have them right here.
Be Cajon Valley. That's we live the brand. We speak positively about it. Empower staff. We allow staff to make those decisions, just like at the Ritz-Carlton. An employee can use their discretion to solve a problem. Emphasize relationships. Build community. Communicate positively is an important one. We never engage in blame or shame, and always take feedback and concerns with grace. Deliver as a team, innovate and develop, and deliver impeccable service. And that equates to language and follow through. But one of the things that he shared with us is, like at Starbucks, their process is very simple and easy to remember. So when a customer at Starbucks comes in and their vision is, we're not in the coffee business selling to people, we're in the people business selling coffee. And so when we have a concern, we use the latte method. An employee would listen to the concern, acknowledge the concern. I'm so sorry, we messed up your order. Latte, thank the customer for saying it. Thank you so much for letting me know. Second T, tell them what you're going to do about it. If you'll give me the opportunity, what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace your order and I'm going to make this coffee free. And then E, explain what happened. This was my fault. I rushed the order and I'm so sorry. It will never happen again. Thank you, Jennifer, for coming in today. And it's simple. Latte is easy. And so we're starting to put simple systems, and we stole that one for communicate positively, because it's a very easy way to say when someone complains, whether it's a student, parent, or even an employee, listen, acknowledge, thank them, tell them what you're going to do, explain what happened, and then build a relationship. So we're in the process of building systems into place that are easy to remember and easy to quantify.
I like the simplicity aspect of this. Michael, I'm going to go to you next. How do you do this? How do you make this a reality and help it to be real?
It's kind of like implement any types of systems that you're trying to do, like PBIS in schools. To be a PBIS school, there are certain things that you define what the expectations are, and you find ways to celebrate those when those are met. So we celebrate. I created an award called the Spread Love award. Love stands for living our values every day. So at every governing board meeting, a school comes up and presents who are their recipients of the Spread Love Award. And they're very explicit in who they're selecting, which value. You know, if you're selected for growth, they're going to give a little talk about, how Dave has shown growth over the past. And we just kind of drive this in everything that we do. More than our mission and more than our vision statement, our values are very well known. And so it's at the point, we're in that beginning stage. We're using our marketing. We want our parents to know. We want our whole community to know that these are our values, that this is here, folks, that we're recognizing for spreading love throughout our community. We involve parents. We involve, we recognize parents that do this. We recognize community members that are exemplars of our values.
So that's also aligned with simplicity, and that's a common link between the three of you is simplicity. But Jennifer, how is that showing up? How are you moving this in a much more real way and making it tangible for folks?
Well, I don't know if I could have said it any better than either Dave or Michael. I mean, I would probably say the very same thing. I think the only thing I would add to that is that it's a constant. You can never, you're never done with, you're always going to have new employees coming in, new families moving in. So you constantly have to live it. You have to breathe it. You have to say it. It has to be, evident in everything that you do. And I think that and it starts at the top. So your school board, your superintendent, your senior leadership team, all has to be in alignment and marching in one direction. So, but I think they've said it beautifully. And I took notes on the latte. I love that. Like I'm at Starbucks all the time. So thank you, Dave. That's really, really easy to remember. I like that.
Nice. I love the idea of stealing things, and we're really good at that in education. But what I also love, coming from a background not in education, it's always fascinating to me to look at parallelisms and sort of ways that the business world has figured some stuff out that we maybe hadn't thought about in a certain way in education, and vice versa. I mean, there's also there's enough things that go both ways. And so what I am gathering, and hopefully there's folks, I'm getting some messages over here. Hopefully what some folks are starting to take away is that, yes, this starts with a vision of where we're going, but it very quickly rolls into how are we going to get there, and what are the things that we hold on to, our beliefs about an experience, our beliefs about how people should interact. And what I'm also taking away, and hope others do, is that those are simple. Sometimes, and I'm sure you have also, sometimes you see that those core values are really complicated and they're hard to understand. And for someone to actually, they're long, they're big and ponderous, and I'm sure they're written in ed speak, right? And only those of us who are educators can really understand them. And so that means nothing to the community at all. Like all the ed speak that we want to put into things doesn't mean much. So how do you engage the community in helping to move this forward? Because you're right, it does have to be, everyone has to be able to say it, everyone has to be able to do it and show it and all those things. How do you engage the community in that? And Dave, you started with that, but how are you maintaining that continuity?
Well, first, Chris, I'm excited to be connected with Michael and Jennifer now, because I would say we're cut from the same cloth and have been sharpened probably by the same circumstances to get to where we are, just based on hearing my colleagues talk. For the community, though, we wanted to measure, were the vision, mission, and promises actually being experienced the way that we hope them to be by our students, employees, and community. So we started with a Gallup student, parent, and employee engagement poll. And the employee engagement poll is called the Q12. It measures, do employees feel cared about? Do they have the materials they need to do their work well? Do they feel loved and respected by their colleagues, by their boss? The conditions that would lead to employee engagement. Student engagement is very similar too. Does my teacher care about me as a child? Does my teacher give me feedback about my work? Do I have friends at lunch? Like the questions that that if a kid can answer 5 on all those, that's a happy kid and healthy relationships. And then the parent poll is similar. The principal knows my child. These are things like, we should probably measure that. The teacher knows my child's interest, or I feel welcome when I come into the school office. The problem with the Gallup poll is it's only once a year, and it's kind of like, the NCLB data. It's like a autopsy. It's not something that's actionable on a regular basis. So we're looking at new systems to measure more frequently and more specifically around our mission, vision, and promises. But the Gallup was a great place to start, and it gave us a good look at what accountability could look like in a meaningful way.
I loved listening to that, Dave, because it really got me thinking about our climate, survey that we do. It's way too wordy. It's got way too many questions. It's given once a year. Like those things that you were just talking about were so aligned to what you talked about as your promises and your vision. It's almost like we have this, working conditions survey that was developed here away. And it's true. It was the working conditions survey that we use now was developed 6 years before our strategic plan. Maybe we need to do something about that.
Totally. I think that's remarkable. And sadly, there are more systems than not that have that same predicament, Michael, where they're just rolling a survey because they have to roll a survey, and there's little thought about how is this internalized on the outside, and how do people interface with it. So Michael, how are you engaging, aside from that survey that's given once a year that we now know is ineffective? How are you engaging the community and maintaining the work?
Well, when you were saying that Jennifer has this big marketing campaign behind her, we're a really small district, 2,500 kids. Just to invest the money into marketing. Now that we're declining enrollment and all of the districts around are declining enrollment, now all of a sudden marketing is this huge priority. And so I'm kind of glad that I've got my governing board behind wanting to see more done on that marketing sense. But it really is, you're only going to find out by asking the people that that it matters to. So we talk all the time about stakeholder engagement. Dave really got into the frequency part. Once a year is not good enough, because then you're only doing something about it once a year, right? You're responding once a year. If you've got a simple way of collecting the data, and people mind taking a big, heavy survey. Like that takes a lot, but if there's touch points where you can collect that data often. So I'm learning a lot just in this conversation about what I want to do, not about, I can't speak as effectively about what we are doing, but we have put a lot into our social media over the past year, and seeing a lot of engagement with families, with our community, and seeing the types of things that they like to see from our schools about what's happening with their kids. They want to see that present, and they interact with us. They engage with us through that, and leaning into we're not a Facebook world anymore. So, leaning into TikTok, leaning into Instagram in ways that allow for more engagement and more connection with parents. And if we can find ways to get these surveys that we don't have developed yet, but now that I'm really thinking about, we've got a lot more to do to get that information about how we're actually live. We're talking about how we live out the values. We need to find out from our parents about how they think we're living them out.
Interesting. And what I'm hearing is an authentic relationship, right? Because that's about communication. It's about being people being people with each other. And for a long time, there's been a slight disconnect between what happens in the school and what happens outside of the school. But what I'm seeing, and it's showing up in this conversation, is some blurring of that somewhat. and people are having some authenticity in their interactions. Jennifer, how are you engaging the community in sustaining this?
Well, I mean, I think we struggle with the same thing. You know, we do a survey, but I totally agree with both Dave and Michael. It's not always super helpful, and it is sort of summative data. What I've tried to do is, you know, I think I'd always prefer a face-to-face conversation if I can have one, and so I do try to get out to. I offer myself to all the we have 46 campuses. So, you know, I go out to all the PTA meetings, booster club meetings, you know, when invited, if they want me to speak, and they usually do. But, you know, I get some of my best. So I also have a student that's in my own personal student is in the school system. And I actually get the best information at football games and basketball games and theater events and that kind of thing. And I mean, sometimes I don't go with anything planned, but there's sometimes I'll go with, you know, I'm going to ask a few people about whatever it is I'm trying, if it's, you know, about how well are we doing as a system meeting your needs or whatever. And you can get all kinds of information that way from both the kids and the parents. And so that's just another strategy I employ. It by no means gets to everybody. We have actually talked about this upcoming school year, trying to do some focus groups. So wouldn't get everybody's voice, but doing some strategic focus groups around the school district, and really talking to parents about how they feel about lots of different things. I do have a student advisory group that I meet with once a month, and they're very candid, and they have had a lot of impact on some policies that they didn't think were fair, and they had suggestions about how they could be better, and we listen to them. And if it's something that we can do, we try to do it. So that has also, getting to know the kids on a personal level has been super helpful as well. And I always think that, you know, where you have happy kids, the parents are usually not far behind. It's not always true, but most of the time it is. So that's a work in progress for us. We don't have that exactly figured out either.
It seems as though, I mean, obviously, and you've all said it in different ways, it's an ongoing process, right? And so things are going to change, things are going to shift and move. We're kind of on sand sometimes. As a marketer, knowing that schools don't generally market, it's not even something that's spoken of in nonprofit land. It seems like all the stuff that we're talking about today also comes down to that MarCom, that marketing communications planning that sometimes exists, but sometimes it's not even thought about, right? And that's a little scary to me because a lot of it is based on perception, and you can build the message and you can build the perception, but you have to be mindful about it. You can't just it's not going to happen by accident. It just won't. And if you're experiencing attrition, it's time to take the gloves off. And we got to start going after them. I mean, I think of anyone who wears any of the outdoor brands. My son works at Arc'teryx, and there's a feel for things. North Face, pick any of them, and there's a feel, and you know what they're about and what you're supposed to be about if you're wearing one of those. Same for a school, right? I mean, the same thing should be expected for a school. I know what I'm going to get. I know what my experience is going to be. And the system is working diligently to make sure that happens. So we're approaching our 0 hour, and I always want to end these with some advices. And so think about, as you're talking, I have 5 people in the back of my mind, and there's emails popping into my inbox from some colleagues. What's your advice? How do you either start and or sustain, right? Because that messy middle, it just gets long. The battle is hard, and it's not easy work, but it's fulfilling. What's your advice for someone just sort of starting out on this journey? Dave, I'll go to you first.
Well, one of the words of advice come from a quote that I'm not sure who said it, but it goes like this: the culture of an organization is based upon the worst behavior the leader is willing to tolerate. And so along the way of developing a mission, vision, and promises for us, our core values, there will be people that have belief systems and attitudes that don't align with that inside the organization. And it's important that the leader and the principals or building leaders have not just the authority, but the permission to say no, to say that we do not allow language and behavior that don't align with what we're trying to achieve. And we've had to dismiss quite a few principals and people that came with the accountability system of No Child Left Behind and haven't been able to leave that mindset behind because it interferes with moving forward. So I would say to people that are in the beginning or in the middle of this process is to have the courage to say no and stand up to those that are resisting, because when you do that, it allows the other silent ones that want to move forward to charge faster.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Michael, what do you think? Same question.
I was just thinking more on the practicality side of think about that last question. I'm glad Dave talked about the principalship, because that's what I was going to get into. Our principals are so important to all of this work. Kids, I talk about the core values of the district, and that's my job. I'm the superintendent of the district, but kids attend schools. They don't attend a district, right? As much as I want that district image to go forward. I was a principal for 10 years, and I know that that's the greatest touch point. So having the right principles in place to make this stuff happen. I can do the work from the district perspective, but the principals run the actual communities where this living happens. So at one point I had to hit mute on the camera because one of my former colleagues is returning to us as a principal this year, that was principal for 9 years and became a curriculum director elsewhere. And it came back, and the joy that exploded in my office from her being back. And it's like, yes, that's what we need. We need that feeling about seeing someone that's a school leader on all the campuses. I know my role is important, but to me, when it comes to moving things forward within a school district, there's nothing more important than the right principles.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's an area that tends to get overlooked. Unfortunately, in our systems, largely, our administrators get passed up. The PD for administrators is relatively low, and support for administrators is not as impactful or effective as I would prefer to see it. And that's further work for me. Maybe that's season 3. I'll jump into admin support. Jennifer, what's your advice for folks who are just jumping into this pool, or maybe they're in the messy middle, or struggling with things? What's your advice for folks?
Well, my mantra is less is more, and to be focused and clear about what you're about, what your priorities are as the superintendent, and what your expectations are as the superintendent for the system. I sort of live by, and it's something I learned from the first superintendent I worked for, that a system really can't handle more than 2 or 3 priorities at a time. And so when you start, when you veer off your message and you don't stay focused and you don't stay clear on your messaging and what you're about, then you get into a lot of other things and you're not going to be successful. The second thing I would say, kind of piggybacking on what Michael was talking about with principals and hiring, make sure you hire well. And when you are interviewing a candidate for any position, especially a principal position, make sure, it's important that the person is skilled and they understand, the professional learning community work, how to read data, and all those things are important. I'm not saying they're not, but you should have some key questions about your core values in your question set. And if a candidate is not able to answer questions that are in alignment with what you're about as a system, I would tell you, I don't care how good they answer all the other questions, don't hire them. You won't be happy. They're not going to fit, and you're going to end up having to exit them from the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are all hard things. What all 3 of you just talked about sounds easy. And I'm like, yeah, of course you should do that. Help people to be happy elsewhere. And yet I know fully that once you step into that role, especially if you're a young administrator, I think at my point in my career, it becomes really easy to do that. But I can think of a number of opportunities where a young administrator is going to have a hard conversation, and that's tough. I had a similar experience with a superintendent that I would claim as one of my greatest mentors, who in fact did that. He stood up in front of the entire staff at a convocation and said, "Here's where we're going. Here's why we're going there. We really want you to be there with us, because this is a collective journey. But if this isn't something that you feel like you can get behind and do authentically and help us to get to where we need to be, then the door is right there. And today's your opportunity to walk out the door. We want you to be happy elsewhere." And it was pin drop in that auditorium of 3,500 people. But that, that was the truth. It was truth telling time, because the work's going to be hard, and we got to get to where we need to go. So I very much appreciate, we're out of time, and I very much appreciate the three of you for sharing what you did today. I know that it's a deep topic, and we only had 60 minutes to sort of traipse through it. And I love being around all three of you. There's a really positive energy. For everybody listening who's joining us off screen, make sure you take note of these three. If you're a superintendent, I know that all three of these individuals will gladly share stuff with you, because that's what we do. We collaborate, and this is a collaborative space. And so make sure that you hold on to these three individuals, because they've got some stuff figured out. And I go back to them often and use these folks as models in my conversations with others. And so this has been a great conversation. Again, thank you. Next week on the 21st, we're jumping into our last episode for the season. It's going to be about using time differently. And so what we're digging into in the next episode is shifts that we can make in the master schedule that make time for individualized learning and personalized learning, but also make time for teaching and for those relationships that we know are super, super important. So again, thank you folks for joining. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Michael. And this is us signing off from the Horizon Room. Have a great day for learning.